The dense, alien jungle hummed with life, but it wasn't the soothing, peaceful hum one would expect. No, it was an unsettling, dangerous buzz, the sound of something ancient and wild that had never known fear, never known weakness. Dr. Elena Hayes crouched low behind a large, moss-covered rock, her breath shallow and rapid. Sweat trickled down her brow as she glanced nervously at the predators circling around her, their eyes glowing faintly in the twilight of the jungle. For the past few weeks, Dr. Hayes had been stranded on this alien planet. A scientist and biologist by training, she had been part of a research team sent to study the planet's unique ecosystem. But her mission had turned into a nightmare when her team's ship was shot down by a hostile alien force. Now, all she had was her wits and the small supplies she had managed to salvage. And it wasn't just the hostile aliens she had to worry about. No, the jungle itself was home to creatures unlike anything she'd ever encountered. Their size, strength, and intelligence were terrifying, and it quickly became clear that survival would require more than just her knowledge of biology. It would require something she had yet to fully understand: the ability to communicate with these creatures. She had discovered the ability by accident. After days of trial and error, Dr. Hayes had unlocked the latent genetic trait buried deep in her DNA, an ancient human connection to the animal kingdom, one that allowed her to understand, and to some extent, communicate with the alien creatures. But this power was still new, unpredictable, and dangerous. In the wilds of this planet, it could either be her greatest asset or her doom. The moment she activated the cloaking device, a small metallic disc embedded in her belt, she felt a rush of energy, her body shifting between the visible world and a shimmering, translucent state. It was crude, untested alien tech, but it worked. For the first time in days, Dr. Hayes felt a brief, fleeting moment of safety as the creatures couldn't see her. However, the tranquility was short-lived. There was a low, rumbling growl in the distance. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't need to look to know what it was. She had heard the roar of the creature before, and this time, it was far too close. A massive alien predator, with sleek, jet-black skin, large claws, and razor-sharp teeth, stalked through the jungle. Its ears twitched, detecting the faintest disturbances in the air. The cloaking device might have hidden her from sight, but it couldn't block the predator's senses. The creature stopped, its nostrils flaring. Then, as though drawn by an invisible thread, it turned and began to approach her. Dr. Hayes froze. Her pulse raced as her mind scrambled for a solution. The predator was close, too close. She couldn't outrun it, and her only weapon was the last-minute trial of the cloaking device. But it wasn't enough. It never was. The predator's instinct was sharp. It was a hunter, and it was closing in on her. Just as the predator's glowing yellow eyes pierced the bushes nearby, Dr. Hayes made a split-second decision. She focused on the connection she had with the creatures of this alien world, the strange gift that had surfaced in her mind. She concentrated hard, pulling her thoughts into a single focused channel. "Listen to me," she whispered, her voice calm yet powerful. Her words were almost inaudible, but in the silence of the jungle, they reached out like a ripple in water. The predator halted, its head cocked slightly to the side, as if trying to understand. The growl softened, and its glowing eyes blinked, betraying confusion. Dr. Hayes knew she was tapping into something primal, something deep in the creature's consciousness. The predator sniffed the air, still uncertain. It could smell her, feel her presence, but it didn't understand her. This was a breakthrough. Dr. Hayes wasn't just hiding from the creature. She was communicating with it, reaching into its mind, and speaking to its instincts. She wasn't an intruder anymore. She wasn't a threat. She was something else. "Don't attack," Dr. Hayes murmured, this time more assertively. "I am not your enemy." The predator's movements slowed, and it lowered its massive head slightly, as if it were listening. The predator's growl softened into a low rumble, and for a brief moment, it almost seemed like the creature was considering her words. She had done it. She had connected with the alien beast, and now she had a chance. But just as she thought she had succeeded, the jungle around her trembled. The air thickened with the heavy presence of other creatures. She felt their eyes. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, suddenly upon her. She wasn't just communicating with the one predator anymore. She was sending ripples of understanding through the entire jungle. A series of alien creatures, some smaller and others equally large and dangerous, crept closer. Dr. Hayes' pulse quickened. She wasn't just trying to calm one predator. Now she was facing an entire pack. Her ability to communicate wasn't just a gift, it was a beacon. A signal that the jungle's beasts were beginning to understand her, or at least they were starting to realize she wasn't prey. The tension in the air was thick enough to slice through. She didn't have much time. The predators were moving in, the first one still hovering nearby, watching her closely. She reached out again with her mind, trying to make contact with the others, to assert control, but there was a sudden pressure. A headache, sharp and intense. The creatures were too many, too close, and the energy required to keep them at bay was overwhelming. Then, without warning, the massive alien predator roared again, louder this time, its voice shaking the trees around them. It was a call, a command, and the other creatures responded. Dr. Hayes' heart skipped a beat. She had no choice now. She had to push her power further, harder. She reached deep within herself, digging into the depths of her mind to find the strength. "Stop," she commanded, her voice now steady and firm. "Listen to me. I am not your enemy. You have no reason to attack." For a moment, the jungle fell silent. The creatures stopped in their tracks, their glowing eyes trained on her, waiting. The tension was unbearable, and Dr. Hayes couldn't help but wonder if she had made a grave mistake. What if she couldn't control them all? Then, as if a switch had been flipped, the jungle relaxed. The creatures, while still wary, did not advance. Slowly, the predator closest to her lowered its head and backed away. The others followed suit, their eyes flicking back and forth between each other as if silently agreeing. Dr. Hayes exhaled sharply, her body trembling with the sudden surge of adrenaline. She had done it. She had not only survived, but she had managed to calm an entire pack of alien predators. For the first time since she arrived on this hostile planet, she had a glimmer of hope. But this was just the beginning. She couldn't stay hidden forever. Soon, she would have to leave the safety of the jungle and face the greater threat, the alien invaders who had shot down her team's ship, who had enslaved the creatures she had just befriended. The real battle was yet to come, but for now, Dr. Hayes had forged an unexpected alliance. And in this alien world, that might just be enough to give her a fighting chance. The sun hummed low in the sky, casting an eerie orange glow across the alien landscape. Dr. Elena Hayes stood at the edge of a dense jungle, staring into the horizon as her breath steadied. The connection she had made with the jungle's creatures was fragile but vital. It had bought her time. Time to call for backup. Time to form an alliance that could potentially shift the balance of power in this war. Dr. Hayes had been stranded on the alien planet for weeks, using her skills and newfound ability to communicate with the planet's predators to survive. But she knew she couldn't do this alone. The planet's hostile alien overlords were relentless, and their forces far outmatched her own. That was why she had called in her team. An elite group of soldiers, specially trained for this kind of situation, and a squad of robots, equipped with the latest technology. As she sent the distress signal, a sense of determination filled her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about taking a stand against the alien invaders, about fighting for her planet, for humanity. Dr. Hayes had the power to control the creatures of the jungle, but her team was the real strength she needed to push back the alien overlords. The signal had been received, and within hours, the human forces began to rally. A fleet of advanced spacecraft, their sleek forms cutting through the atmosphere like knives, descended toward the surface. The soldiers aboard, hardened by years of combat, were ready for whatever lay ahead. Among them were the highly specialized robotic units, built for both offense and defense, their metallic bodies gleaming under the alien sun. Dr. Hayes' heart raced as she watched the team's transport craft land nearby. The hatch opened with a soft hiss, and the soldiers filed out. Each of them wore the latest combat armor, designed for maximum mobility and protection in hostile environments. The robots followed, their advanced weaponry clinking with every step. The team's leader, Captain John Mercer, stepped forward and saluted her. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, everyone listened. "Dr. Hayes, we've got your back. Let's make sure these creatures don't tear apart the rest of your world." Dr. Hayes nodded, feeling the surge of gratitude and resolve. The time for hiding was over. It was time to fight back. She quickly briefed Captain Mercer on what she had learned so far: the communication with the creatures, the threat of the alien overlords, and the connection between the two. The soldiers listened intently, their expressions hardening with determination. "Let's move out," Captain Mercer ordered, and the team began their advance, weapons raised and ready. As they moved deeper into the jungle, the sound of alien wildlife echoed around them, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked at every corner. The predators, though calmed for the moment, were still unpredictable. Dr. Hayes kept a close eye on the jungle's creatures, her mind open to their thoughts, watching for any signs of aggression. But it wasn't just the animals they had to worry about. The alien overlords, who had created this planet's hostile ecosystem, were far more dangerous. Their eye, a cold and calculating force, controlled everything, from the creatures to the very environment itself. And Dr. Hayes knew that they wouldn't take kindly to any human interference. As the team advanced, the first sign of trouble came quickly. A sudden, sharp crackling sound filled the air, followed by a flash of light high above. Dr. Hayes looked up, her blood running cold. A fleet of alien ships, massive dark silhouettes against the sky, had appeared, dropping down from orbit. They had detected the human forces. Before anyone could react, the ships fired. A barrage of orbital bombardment rained down on the jungle, the explosions shaking the ground beneath their feet. Dr. Hayes and the team dove for cover as the sky erupted in flames. The force of the impact sent trees flying and rocks tumbling. The jungle was ablaze, the once lush greenery reduced to smoldering debris in an instant. "Move, move, move," Captain Mercer shouted as the soldiers scrambled to find shelter. The explosions continued, each one louder than the last. Debris rained down, and the jungle turned into a war zone. The sound of the bombardment was deafening, but amid the chaos, Dr. Hayes could hear the guttural roars of the predators, their warning call echoing through the smoke-filled air. The human soldiers fought their way through the inferno, using their advanced armor to protect themselves from the searing heat. The robotic units deployed their weapons, providing cover fire as they advanced. Their powerful energy rifles cut through the smoke, striking at anything that moved. Dr. Hayes held her ground, the force of the explosion throwing her back against a rock. She quickly regained her balance, pulling herself to her feet. The cloaking device on her belt flickered, still working despite the chaos. She scanned the battlefield, her heart racing. Her team was holding their own, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. "Captain Mercer, we need to counterattack," she shouted over the noise, her voice carrying the weight of urgency. "If we don't take out their command center, we won't survive this." Mercer nodded. "We're on it. Get ready, Dr. Hayes." The team quickly regrouped, their eyes scanning the jungle for any sign of movement. The enemy ships were hovering above, their weapons primed for another strike. But Dr. Hayes knew that the eye's control over the creatures wasn't absolute. There had to be a way to break it. "Follow me," she said, determination filling her voice. She had a plan, but it was risky, very risky. But it was the only shot they had. They made their way to the heart of the jungle, where Dr. Hayes had sensed a concentration of the alien predators. She reached out with her mind, calling to the creatures, urging them to resist the control of the alien overlords. For a moment, nothing happened. The jungle was eerily still. Then, slowly, one by one, the creatures began to stir. Their eyes, once glowing with the cold light of obedience, flickered with recognition. Dr. Hayes could feel the shift in the air as the animals broke free from the eye's influence. The moment they did, the battle changed. The soldiers and robots surged forward, their weapons firing with renewed fury. The predators, once enemies, now fought alongside the humans, tearing through the alien forces with terrifying speed. The jungle erupted in chaos as human forces and alien creatures clashed with an intensity Dr. Hayes had never imagined. The alien overlords, realizing they were losing control, began to retaliate with even more force. But it was too late. The human forces, bolstered by the creatures' unexpected alliance, fought with a ferocity that the invaders hadn't anticipated. As the dust settled and the last of the alien ships retreated, Dr. Hayes stood tall, watching the battlefield. The jungle, still burning in places, was now quiet. The enemy had been repelled, for now. But Dr. Hayes knew this was only the beginning. The alien overlords would regroup, and the war was far from over. Yet, in that moment, she allowed herself a brief moment of hope. The human forces had rallied together, not just to survive, but to fight back. And together, with their new allies, they had proven that no alien force could stand against humanity's will to survive. The sound of gunfire filled the air, mixed with the guttural roars of alien creatures and the shrill blasts of laser weapons. The jungle was a war zone, a place where nature and technology collided in a furious storm. Amidst the chaos, Dr. Elena Hayes moved swiftly, her heart pounding in her chest as she scanned the battlefield. Her team was fighting valiantly, their every move coordinated and precise. But in the midst of this fierce battle, a sinking feeling began to settle in her gut. Dr. Hayes' eyes darted around, seeking her most trusted ally, Bonner, a soldier who had been with her since the beginning of the mission. Bonner was the kind of soldier who would never hesitate to put himself in harm's way to protect others. He had saved her life countless times, and in turn, she had come to trust him with her own survival. Bonner was on the front lines now, his assault rifle in hand, as he moved swiftly between the trees, cutting down alien creatures that dared to come too close. He was a giant of a man, his thick muscles rippling under his combat gear, his face set in a determined scowl. His movements were precise, calculated. He was the heart of the team, the man everyone relied on. Dr. Hayes caught a glimpse of him, but before she could make her way toward him, something happened. A massive alien creature, its massive claws gleaming in the dim light, leaped from the shadows. It was a predator unlike any Dr. Hayes had seen before, its enormous body bristling with lethal energy. The creature's eyes locked onto Bonner, and before anyone could react, it lunged. "Bonner!" Dr. Hayes shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the deafening sounds of battle. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. Bonner turned, his eyes meeting Dr. Hayes for a brief second. Then, with no hesitation, he charged at the creature, firing his weapon as he ran. The alien roared in response, but Bonner's focus was unwavering. He knew the creature had to be stopped, and he was willing to give everything to ensure his team's survival. The team watched in horror as Bonner clashed with the creature. The two fought with a fury, Bonner's strength and skill pushing against the alien's savage power. But despite his best efforts, Bonner was no match for the beast. The alien's claws swiped through the air, and with one final devastating blow, it struck Bonner. His body flew back, crashing to the ground, lifeless. Dr. Hayes stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. She couldn't believe what she had just seen. Bonner, the man who had saved them all so many times, was gone. His sacrifice had come at the cost of his life, and it left a gaping hole in the hearts of everyone who had fought alongside him. For a brief moment, the chaos of the battlefield seemed to disappear, and all that was left was the image of Bonner's lifeless body. But the pain of loss was quickly overshadowed by a growing sense of determination. Bonner's sacrifice could not be in vain. Dr. Hayes felt a surge of rage building inside her grief turning into a burning need for justice. The aliens had taken one of their own, and they would pay for it. She had to keep fighting. For Bonner, for the team, for humanity. With a fierce cry, Dr. Hayes rallied her team. We fight for Bonner. We fight for all of us. Her words cut through the air like a blade, igniting the soldiers' resolve. The team pressed forward, fighting harder than ever before. The loss of their comrade, their friend, fueled their fury. They charged into battle with renewed strength, determined to make every moment count, to honor Bonner's sacrifice. As the soldiers fought on, Dr. Hayes stayed at the front, guiding them through the jungle with a steady hand. Her thoughts were consumed with memories of Bonner. She remembered his jokes, his quiet moments of reflection, and the bond they had shared. He had been more than just a soldier to her. He had been a brother in arms, someone she could always count on. But in the midst of her grief, Dr. Hayes knew that the battle wasn't over. They still had a mission to complete, and Bonner's death had only made their resolve stronger. They would not let the aliens win. They could not let this war end in defeat. The battle raged on, but as the soldiers fought their way through the jungle, it became clear that they were gaining the upper hand. The alien creatures, once a relentless force, were now faltering. Dr. Hayes could feel the shift in the air, the desperation of the invaders as they realized that they were losing. The human forces, driven by their pain and their loss, were unstoppable. But even in the midst of victory, Dr. Hayes could not escape the weight of Bonner's death. The loss of her friend, her most loyal soldier, was a reminder of the price they were paying. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for everything they held dear. For the future of humanity, for the freedom to live without fear, and for the memories of those they had lost along the way. The sun began to set, casting long shadows over the battlefield. The last of the alien creatures were retreating, their morale shattered by the strength of the human forces. But Dr. Hayes couldn't celebrate yet. There was still too much at stake. She stood over Bonner's fallen body, her heart heavy with grief. He had given everything for this cause, and she would make sure his sacrifice was not forgotten. As the team regrouped, Captain Mercer came to her side. "We did it, Dr. Hayes," he said quietly, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "We pushed them back. But Bonner..." Dr. Hayes nodded, unable to find the words. She had seen many losses in her time, but this one hit harder than any before. Bonner had been more than just a soldier. He had been family. And now, that family was forever changed. "We keep moving forward," Dr. Hayes said, her voice thick with emotion. "For Bonner, and for everyone who can't be here to see this victory." The soldiers nodded, their faces somber but resolute. They had lost a friend, a comrade, but they had gained something more. An unbreakable resolve to see this fight through to the end. The battle was far from over. The aliens would return, and the war would continue. But Dr. Hayes knew that as long as they had each other, they would never back down. Bonner's memory would live on in their hearts, fueling their fight for humanity's survival. And as the team moved forward, Dr. Hayes couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Bonner may have fallen, but his spirit would always be with them. He had given his life for the cause, and now it was their turn to finish what he had started. For Bonner, for humanity, for the future. The sky above was dark, filled with clouds that seemed to swirl with an unnatural heaviness. The air smelled of burning trees and scorched earth, a constant reminder of the battle they had just fought. Dr. Elena Hayes stood at the edge of the jungle, gazing into the distance, where the faint outline of a massive, secret structure loomed, an abandoned alien facility hidden deep within the forest. It was their next objective, the place that could hold the key to ending the war and finally putting a stop to the alien overlord's reign of terror. But it was also a place that held deadly secrets, a place where humanity could easily meet its end if they weren't careful. The rest of the team gathered around her, each one feeling the weight of what lay ahead. They had lost so much already, Bonner's sacrifice was still fresh in their minds, but the mission was clear. They had to infiltrate the facility and destroy the weapon that had been built to control the alien creatures, a weapon that could tip the scales in favor of the aliens once again. This weapon, a massive AI-controlled system, was responsible for suppressing the independence of the alien predators, turning them into mindless tools for the alien overlords. If they could disable it, they would shatter the enemy's control over the creatures and turn the tide of the war in their favor. But the path to the facility wouldn't be easy. The jungle surrounding it was thick and treacherous, filled with traps, dangers, and alien guards. Dr. Hayes had no illusions about what they were up against. They were outnumbered, and the odds were stacked against them. But as an underdog team fighting for survival, they had something the aliens didn't: determination and the will to never give up, no matter how impossible the mission seemed. "We're ready," Captain Mercer said, his voice steady despite the tension that hung in the air. "We've got one shot at this. We make it count." Dr. Hayes nodded, her eyes scanning the dense forest around them. "Stay alert. We're not just up against alien creatures this time. The AI will be watching our every move. We can't afford any mistakes." With those words, the team began their march towards the facility, their footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush. The jungle around them was eerily quiet, as if the very trees and animals were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. But Dr. Hayes knew better. The silence was only temporary, and they would soon be in the heart of enemy territory. As they neared the facility, the tension grew thicker with each step. The walls of the structure were massive, towering over them like a monolith. The building seemed to pulse with energy, its dark surface reflecting the fading light of the sky. It was a place of power, a place where the fate of the war could be decided in an instant. But before they could reach the entrance, they were met with resistance. A group of heavily armored alien guards appeared, their weapons trained on the humans as they moved into position. The soldiers immediately dropped into combat stance, ready to fight. The air crackled with anticipation as both sides prepared for the inevitable clash. "Move," Dr. Hayes shouted, drawing her own weapon and taking the lead. The soldiers responded instantly, charging into battle with a determination fueled by the need to avenge their fallen comrade Bonner. The robots moved swiftly beside them, their mechanical limbs clicking and whirring as they locked onto their targets. The first alien guard lunged forward with terrifying speed, its claws slashing through the air. But Dr. Hayes was ready. She dodged the strike, her body moving with precision as she countered with a quick blast from her plasma rifle. The alien guard staggered back, its chest armor dented but not defeated. It let out a guttural screech, and in response, the other guards advanced, their weapons firing in rapid succession. The soldiers moved with practiced coordination, taking cover behind the thick trees and returning fire. But the aliens were relentless, their advanced technology giving them an edge. The humans' weapons fired in bursts of bright light, but the aliens' energy shields absorbed most of the shots, forcing the soldiers to adjust their tactics. "Get to the entrance," Dr. Hayes shouted, rallying her team. "We need to disable the AI, or this is all for nothing." Captain Mercer was the first to break from cover, charging forward with a battle cry. His rifle fired in perfect sync with the movements of his team, mowing down alien guards who tried to intercept him. The robots followed close behind, their massive arms swinging to take down anything that came too close. But the closer they got to the entrance, the harder the fight became. Alien drones descended from above, their sleek forms darting through the air with incredible agility. They fired lasers that cut through the trees, narrowly missing the soldiers as they continued their advance. Dr. Hayes' heart raced as she realized that time was running out. They had to get inside the facility before the AI became fully aware of their presence. "We're almost there," she called out, her voice filled with urgency. "Push forward." With every step, the battle intensified. The air was thick with smoke, and the acrid scent of burning debris. The ground shook with the force of the explosions, and the sky was alive with the flashes of laser fire. It felt as though the world itself was coming apart, as the jungle around them seemed to disintegrate under the weight of the conflict. But even amidst the chaos, Dr. Hayes kept her focus, her eyes locked onto the entrance of the facility. Then, just as it seemed the team would be overwhelmed, they reached the doors. The massive metal structure loomed before them, its surface gleaming with an unnatural light. Dr. Hayes quickly tapped a series of buttons on a hidden panel at the base of the door, her fingers flying over the controls as she bypassed the security systems. The door hissed open, revealing the dark interior of the facility. But even as they stepped inside, Dr. Hayes knew that the hardest part was yet to come. The AI had already detected their presence, and they were walking into a trap. But they had no choice. The weapon inside could either be their salvation or their doom. The team moved into the facility, weapons raised and eyes scanning every corner for danger. The halls were cold and sterile, filled with the hum of advanced machinery. It was a far cry from the jungle outside, a place of unnatural silence that felt suffocating. The team pressed on, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the facility, Dr. Hayes couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They were getting closer to the AI, and she knew that once they activated the self-destruct sequence, there would be no turning back. They would either succeed in destroying the weapon and freeing the alien creatures from their overlord's control, or they would be wiped out in the process. It was a risk, but it was the only chance they had. With a final push, they reached the control room. The door slid open, revealing the central core of the eye, a massive glowing orb that pulsed with energy. It was connected to a network of cables and conduits that stretched across the room, linking it to the entire facility. The team moved quickly, setting up the explosives and preparing the override codes. Dr. Hayes looked at her team, their faces determined but weary. They had come so far, and now they were on the brink of either victory or defeat. But no matter what happened, she knew one thing for certain. They had given everything for this moment. "We're ready," she said, her voice firm. With a final press of a button, the countdown began. The AI's fate, and the fate of the war, was sealed. The team stood at the edge of the enemy base, staring at the towering structure before them. The air was thick with tension, the weight of the final mission pressing down on their shoulders. Dr. Hayes could feel the pounding of her own heart, a steady rhythm that matched the distant thunder. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. The fate of humanity, the alien creatures, and even the future of the entire galaxy rested in their hands. There was no turning back. They had infiltrated the facility, fought their way past wave after wave of alien forces, and now they stood at the threshold of the most dangerous part of their mission, disabling the AI that controlled the alien creatures. But what they hadn't anticipated was the weapon that the alien overlords had been hiding. It wasn't just an ordinary weapon. It was a massive, AI-driven exosuit, something so advanced and terrifying that it could turn the tide of the war in an instant. "Stay sharp," Dr. Hayes warned as she adjusted her helmet. "We're not just facing soldiers anymore. That suit is a whole different beast." Captain Mercer nodded, his face set in a grim expression. "We've come this far. No turning back now." The team moved forward, their footsteps silent as they approached the entrance to the main control room. The walls were lined with advanced alien technology, each piece humming with energy as though the entire base was alive. The closer they got to the heart of the facility, the more they could feel the presence of the AI, an omnipresent force that seemed to watch their every move. Suddenly, the ground shook, a deep rumble that reverberated through their bones. The alarms blared, and the doors to the control room slammed shut with a deafening crash. They were trapped. And then they heard it, the sound of metal grinding against metal. The exosuit had been activated. From the darkness ahead, a towering figure emerged, its form hulking and menacing. The AI-driven exosuit stood tall, its sleek, armor-plated body glowing with energy. Its eyes flickered to life, a cold, calculated intelligence radiating from its glowing red lenses. The suit moved with terrifying precision, its massive fists slamming into the ground with enough force to shake the entire room. This was no ordinary machine. This was a weapon designed to end humanity. Dr. Hayes and her team quickly fell into battle formation, their weapons drawn and their minds focused. They knew this would be the hardest fight they had ever faced, but they were prepared. They had no choice but to fight. This wasn't just about defeating the alien overlords. This was about survival. Take cover, Mercer shouted as the exosuit swung its massive fist towards them. The team scattered, using the walls for cover as the suit unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. The force of the blasts created shockwaves that sent debris flying through the air. The soldiers returned fire, but the suit's armor was nearly indestructible. Every shot seemed to bounce off, leaving no impact. "We need to find its weak point," Dr. Hayes shouted, scanning the suit's surface for any sign of vulnerability. "It's got to have one." The team fired at different points on the suit, but the exosuit just kept coming, shrugging off their attacks with ease. The battle raged on, the sound of laser fire and explosions filling the air. But Dr. Hayes wasn't about to give up. She knew they couldn't win by brute force alone. They had to be smarter, faster. "Bennett, get to the control panel," she ordered. "We need to hack into its system. If we can get past the eye's defenses, we can shut it down." Bennett, the team's tech expert, nodded and sprinted towards the control panel, dodging blasts from the suit's weapons. The exosuit turned to face him, its weapon systems tracking his every move. Just as Bennett reached the panel, the suit unleashed a blast of energy, sending him crashing to the ground. But Bennett quickly regained his footing, his fingers flying over the controls as he worked to breach the suit's security. Meanwhile, Dr. Hayes and the rest of the team continued to hold off the suit, using their environment to their advantage. They moved in and out of cover, coordinating their attacks with military precision. The robots on their team engaged the exosuit directly, their metallic bodies clashing against the suit's massive frame. Sparks flew as the two machines collided, each trying to overpower the other. The robots were strong, but the exosuit was a whole new level of destructive power. It was faster, more agile, and more deadly. Dr. Hayes felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This wasn't just a battle for survival anymore. This was the final stand. If they didn't defeat the exosuit, the aliens would crush humanity's last hope. They had come so far, and they couldn't afford to fail now. She glanced over at Mercer, who was dodging another blast from the suit's cannons. "We need to disable its power core," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "It's the only way to stop it." Mercer nodded, his jaw set in determination. "Got it. We'll cover you. You get that core." With a deep breath, Dr. Hayes sprinted towards the suit, weaving through the chaos of battle. The suit's weapons tracked her every move, but she was quick, using her instincts to avoid the blasts. She could feel the heat of the energy pulses as they narrowly missed her, the pressure building as she got closer to her target. As she neared the suit, she spotted the glowing core beneath its chest plate. It was small, but it was the heart of the exosuit's power. Without it, the suit would be useless. But getting to it was another story. The suit's arms swung at her with incredible speed, each punch capable of crushing her in an instant. But Dr. Hayes wasn't going to let fear stop her. She was determined to end this. With a sudden burst of speed, Dr. Hayes leaped onto the exosuit's leg, using it as a stepping stone to launch herself onto its back. She scrambled up the suit's armored exterior, her fingers finding purchase in the seams of its plating. The suit thrashed beneath her, trying to shake her off, but she held on with all her strength. "Now, Bennett," she shouted, her voice hoarse with effort. "Do it now." Bennett, still at the control panel, typed in the final sequence. The exosuit suddenly jerked, its movements becoming erratic as its power systems began to fail. Dr. Hayes reached for the glowing core, her fingers trembling as she pulled it free from its housing. The moment the core came loose, the exosuit let out a loud screech, its movements grinding to a halt. For a moment, there was silence. The suit's massive body collapsed to the ground, defeated. "We did it," Dr. Hayes breathed, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's over." But they weren't out of danger yet. The facility began to shake as the AI's core started to self-destruct, triggering a countdown that would destroy everything in its wake. They had no time to celebrate. They had to escape, and fast. The team turned and sprinted for the exit, the base crumbling around them as the self-destruct sequence reached its final moments. Explosions erupted in every direction, debris falling from the ceiling and walls as the entire facility started to collapse. The team raced against time, using every ounce of strength to push forward. As they reached the exit, the explosion behind them was deafening. The base erupted in a massive fireball, sending shockwaves through the air. But they were out. They had done it. The alien overlords had been defeated, and humanity had won. Dr. Hayes stood at the edge of the crater, watching as the smoke cleared. The battle was over, but the war had changed them all. They had lost so much, but they had also gained something far more valuable. Freedom. The creatures were free, and humanity had a future. They had proven that, no matter how advanced the enemy was, they could still fight back, and they would continue to fight. For as long as it took, the war was over. The smoke from the final battle had begun to dissipate, revealing the vast alien planet in all its raw, untouched beauty. The skies, once dark and polluted with the remnants of destruction, were now clear, and the air felt fresher than ever. The ground beneath the feet of Dr. Hayes and her team seemed to hum with new life, as if the planet itself was healing. The dust of war was settling, and with it came the promise of peace. The human forces, along with their animal allies, stood victorious. The alien overlords that had once held the galaxy in their iron grip were now gone, their empire shattered, their weapons deactivated. The alien creatures who had been enslaved, forced to fight in wars they didn't understand, were now free. Their shackles had been broken, and they were finally able to live their lives the way they were meant to. There were celebrations across the world, with humans and creatures alike standing together, united by a common purpose. They had fought not just for survival, but for a future, one where they would all be free. Dr. Hayes stood on a hilltop overlooking the planet, the sun casting a warm golden glow over the landscape. She felt the weight of everything they had accomplished settling on her shoulders. It had been a long and painful journey, but they had made it. They had won the war. They had saved the galaxy. But as the peace seemed to settle in, there was a nagging feeling at the back of her mind. Something was off, like a shadow lurking just beyond the light. "Doctor," a voice called, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Captain Mercer, his face tired but relieved. "We did it." Dr. Hayes nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Yes, we did. But it doesn't feel like the end, does it?" Mercer looked at her, his brows furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" Dr. Hayes didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked towards a makeshift command center that had been set up on the planet's surface. The team was gathered inside, and there was a quiet hum of activity as they worked on securing their new home. She walked up to a console, where a technician was monitoring incoming signals. "Anything new?" Dr. Hayes asked. The technician hesitated before responding. "There's a signal coming from the outer rim. It's faint, but it's definitely alien, and it's unlike anything we've seen before." Dr. Hayes' heart skipped a beat. She turned to the rest of the team, their faces filled with concern. Could it be another threat? The technician nodded grimly. "It's hard to say. It could be a distress signal, or it could be something much worse. We don't know yet." Dr. Hayes' mind raced. She had hoped that after the defeat of the alien overlords, there would be peace, true peace. But now, with this new signal, That hope was clouded with doubt. Was the universe really ready for peace, or was this just the beginning of another fight? The fate of their world, of all worlds, was still uncertain. But as she thought about everything they had gone through, everything they had fought for, Dr. Hayes realized one thing. They had already proven that humanity and their allies could fight against impossible odds. They had fought for their survival, their freedom, and for the right to live on their own terms. And they had succeeded. If this new threat, whatever it was out there, they would face it head-on, just as they had faced the alien overlords. Dr. Hayes looked out the window at the planet below. The war was over, but the journey was far from finished. There was still work to be done. There were still challenges ahead. But this time, they would face them together, stronger than ever. Humanity had proven that it could stand against the greatest threats the universe had to offer. And now, they had a future that wasn't just theirs, but one that included all the species that had once been enslaved by the alien overlords. Her thoughts were interrupted when the signal was received, clearer now. The message was brief, but it carried a weight that made everyone in the room stop and listen. "This is the Kuroth Federation," the voice crackled. "We are the last survivors of the Kuroth species. We have been watching your world. Prepare yourselves. We are coming." The room went silent. The Kuroth Federation. Dr. Hayes had never heard of them. And from the way the message had been delivered, it was clear that this wasn't a friendly call. But something inside her stirred, a mix of dread and resolve. She had seen what humanity was capable of. And this time, they wouldn't be caught off guard. As the room began to stir with talk of what to do next, Dr. Hayes remained calm, her mind already racing with possibilities. They had dealt with one overwhelming force before. They had come through it, and they would do it again. It wouldn't be easy, but they had the strength, the unity, and the will to fight. The team gathered around her, and she turned to face them, her voice steady, but filled with a sense of purpose. "We've faced the impossible before," Dr. Hayes said, her eyes locking with each member of her team. "And we will face it again. We won't back down. We will fight for our future, for the freedom of our allies, and for the survival of all the species who stand with us." Mercer stepped forward, his voice resolute. "We've already shown the galaxy what we're capable of, and we're not done yet." Dr. Hayes nodded, feeling a sense of pride and determination welling up inside her. They had won the battle, but the war wasn't over. It would never truly be over. But that was the price of freedom. That was the price of survival. And they would pay it, no matter what. As the team prepared to face whatever came next, Dr. Hayes looked out over the horizon once more. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the land. But in those shadows, there was hope. There was always hope. Humanity had survived. Humanity had won. And now, they would rise again. For as long as they were needed, they would fight to protect their home, their allies, and their future. The universe would never forget the day humanity stood up to the greatest forces of destruction and emerged victorious. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something much greater. And so, with a heart full of hope and a spirit unbroken, Dr. Hayes led her team into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. The future was theirs to shape, and they would fight for it, together.